Today, we interview Cody Townsend, a decorated professional skier turned filmmaker. We talk about his surf roots and how he used a tiny family cabin in Tahoe to break into the Silver Spoon world of ski racing. Ultimately, he turned that success into a monster career in free skiing, and he shared with us lots of great anecdotes about the pro world. Cody then got into the mountaineer side of skiing with his film series, The 50, referring to the descents covered in the book, 50 Classic Ski Descents of North America. In the films, Cody and friends climb and ski these mountains, and we get a window into the decision-making behind these aspirational trips. The final YouTube episode of The 50 comes out this week. We'll link Cody's info in the description. Enjoy the show.
Welcome everybody to Adventure Journal. This is Justin Hausman, online editor and senior editor, sitting in for Stephen Casimiro, our usual host today. He's out, skiing the biggest mountains, plunging into the deepest depths of the ocean, maybe hiking through impenetrable jungle, trying to get more stories for everybody to read at adventurejournal.com and on the print quarterly. So he's not going to be here today, but I am extremely stoked to have Cody Townsend with us today. Legendary free skier, big mountain skier, masochist skier, whatever he wants to call himself. But we're going to chat with Cody a bit about his background. We're going to chat about The 50, which I know you know, his incredible web series about climbing and skiing 50 of the classic ski descents in North America. And we're going to talk a little bit about why he's doing that, where he is in that process, and what is coming next for Cody. But to start things off, Cody, how are you? Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing good. I'm, battling sicknesses. I'm a recent parent, and when you have a toddler that goes to daycare, I didn't know that that's going to be the most difficult thing, is you pretty much spend the entire winter being sick. So besides that, it's been good. We just got off a huge storm cycle here up in the Sierra. It was incredible, and going from there.
Yeah, I kind of figured that you would be maybe skiing this week. I know there's some more snow happening. Probably. Well, is it snowing today? You're in Tahoe, right? Where you're in the Tahoe zone, Truckee zone. Where do you live? Yeah,
I live in Tahoe City, and it's lightly snowing now. Nothing very impressively, but just that last storm we had, it was a below average winter, and now we're above average, and it's more for anything. It was fun skiing through it, but now we're going to actually have a good spring here, which is quite nice.
I'm kind of wondering if this is going to be kind of how it is now, where it just it kind of doesn't snow for a while and then snows all of the snow all at once. I live in Marin County, and it's been like that with rain. I mean, it's the same systems, right? So it's just dry for the first part of winter. It's going to be just kind of a chill winter. And then it just rains nonstop for a month and a half. And you're just at wit's end with it, which is kind of where we are now. But
yeah, I mean, as Californians, we are very knowledgeable and experienced with boom and bust cycles. Yeah. And, I'm sure we're going to have another bust cycle here. Those drought cycles. I grew up in a drought. But, we also have these good years in between. Last year was incredible. And that's just, when you revolve your life and career and passion around the weather, you start to become a little bit more just whatever. I try and make fun out of it. That's certain years are amazing, certain years are less amazing, but you still have fun going skiing. So totally. It's just part of the process.
Well, sorry about the daycare sickness. I'm there. I was actually, right before we hit record, I was talking to Jackson, the producer, about it. His partner is working with little kids, and they're getting sick from it all the time. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and so how old's your kid?
He's 2.5 about.
Yeah. So I was just saying, it took us about 3 or 4 to where we stopped getting sick every winter from whatever the kids have. This winter has been brutal. I don't know how it's been out there, but every kid in school has been gone for weeks at a time, all kinds of pneumonias and all kinds of random stuff. And this is the first year where my wife and I didn't get sick too. So we finally made it through all of that.
Last year was first year in daycare, and I was sick for about 5.5 months straight, which as a professional athlete that relies on endurance and strength was really, really difficult. I was coming off the couch and going for these mega lines and just being wow, I haven't done any exercise for a month and a half, and now I'm going for this mega line. Of course I'm going to be tired. This year's not quite as bad, so I already see that immunity building up. It's only been a month straight. A little over a month now that I've been sick. And then, we picked up our son yesterday from daycare, and he had a runny nose, and I was oh no, It's happening again.
Yeah.
And our wife and I woke up this morning with sore throats. We're like, Jesus, man, this is incredible. I knew having a kid when being a professional athlete was going to be challenging, and I welcomed that challenge, and I wouldn't trade it for anything at this point.
Yeah.
But some of the challenges were a little less had less knowledge about them, and I didn't know that, being ill for the entire winter when my job is a winter job was going to be such an issue.
Well, people probably told you, but you just don't pay attention. You're like, oh yeah, whatever, that's fine. I mean, it's this. I'm not a professional athlete, but my life revolves around doing the things I love doing outside, and so I don't suffer financially or career-wise from it, but emotionally, winters can be pretty tough when you're just constantly inside and constantly having a fever. So, but hey, if you're listening and you don't have kids, what Cody just said is true. It's worth it. So don't let us. I mean, I write a lot about kind of the hilarity and obstacles of being an adventure parent, and it changes things, but you can still do all the things that you love. So don't take the wrong lesson from this. So anyway, Cody, I wanted to start by getting a little bit of your background. I know you're from Santa Cruz, one of my favorite places in the world, and obviously nowhere near the snow. So how does a surfer from Santa Cruz end up being one of the free skiing legend, basically? I mean, kind of talk us through how you fell in love with skiing and where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, it came through my parents, and they were just passionate weekend warrior skiers. They bought a Forest Service cabin in 1980 that I think they bought it for about $25,000, tiny little cabin. Yeah. And you have to hike to it, and they would come up on the weekends. And
they still have it?
Yeah, they still have it, and they're still there.
That's great.
It's an actual cabin. It's like wood-fired stove. When I was growing up, there was no potable water. The wood-fired stove was the only source of heat. It's like a legit cabin. Sweet. And you had to hike to it. We'd bring in gallons of fresh water on our back for the weekend, all our supplies and large backpacks. And maybe that's what kind of got me started on being obsessed with this hiking thing. But from the youngest of ages, I was just obsessed with skiing. I don't know exactly why, but it was just in my blood. And by the time I was 6 years old, I distinctly remember watching Warren Miller's movie Ski Country, which came out, I believe the year I was born, 1982 or 83. And I saw Scott Schmidt jumping the fingers and having this incredible session on KT22 and the Palisades and my home mountain. And I was just watching a legit superhero doing stuff at the mountain you ski at. And I just was at that moment, I'm like, I'm going to be a skier. And I didn't know exactly what kind, or if you could have a job as a skier, but I was just at that moment, I was like, I'm going to be a skier. And that feeling has never faded, which is kind of wild. It was just sometimes I look back and I'm thinking, man, what didn't work out? What if I never made it as a professional skier? How bummed would I have been, because this was like kids dream of being astronauts and firefighters and CEOs or whatever it is to me, I was like, I'm a skier, and that has persisted ever since.
Well, so Santa Cruz, if I'm sure most people kind of know this, but I mean, Santa Cruz is a surf town. I mean, through and through. I love Santa Cruz. I lived in San Francisco for, 12, 13 years, and I grew up down in San Luis Obispo. So Santa Cruz has always been a focal point of my surf. I'm a longtime surf bum. And I'll actually be there on Friday surfing and getting a piece of gear. But how did you, why not surfing?
Yeah, I mean, it starts, I think there's two things. Is you're able to start skiing at 2 years old is when I started skiing. And so I had developed all this memory and time from this youngest of ages. Starting surfing, especially back then at a very young age, was very difficult. Now we see kids getting that are 3 years old getting pushed into waves and stuff that. And, that wasn't the case. I didn't start actually surfing, standing up, until I was about 10 years old. And, it was a lot of boogie boarding and stuff. But I don't know, there was just something about the mountains and the snow that really attached to me. Granted, I love surfing, and it's my second passion, and I'm really passionate about it these days, and travel a lot of the summer for surf, go back home to Santa Cruz and surf. And it's something I really enjoy, because I go home and get to see all the friends you grew up with, paddle out to the lineup, and half the people out there, get waves and all that stuff. But I mean, also, probably just wasn't as good at it for some reason, whether it was body type or something. Right. But like, I grew up with a lot of the people that ended up being professional surfers. So, kids that were sponsored from a young age. But at the same time, like in the middle of winter, I was going up every weekend to go ski instead of surfing. And then the summers are much flatter. And so like, I just think my surf time wasn't quite as there. But again, I also think I just wasn't quite as good at it. I showed much more natural talent at skiing versus surfing.
Are you west side or east side?
East side. I grew up in Pleasure Point. So
perfect. Okay.
Which is crazy too. My dad, he grew up in San Diego. He surfed wind and sea since the 50s and 60s. He was like a Point Loma guy, Bird Rock, all those places. So, and he moved to Santa Cruz because of a cover of Surfer magazine had Steamer Lane when he was 18, and he ended up going to San Jose State and surfing in Santa Cruz. So he was like one of the original sewer peak guys. And,
really?
We have a wind and sea in Santa Cruz too, and that was his kind of break. And he was one of the few surfers allowed to surf it because it was traditionally a body surf spot, and the body surfers would like punch you and tell you to leave and tell you to get lost. Plus they didn't have leashes back then, and if you lost your board, it went into the rock. So, and then it's kind of cool too, because I had a session this fall, and Little Wind and Sea, where the one in Santa Cruz was kind of like the spot I grew up surfing as well. And there's this kind of crew, and it's a really small, diehard Little Wind and Sea crew. And it was me and 3 other dudes who were about 15 to 20 years older than me out there, and it was just like kind of reminiscing. I was like, man, I remember surfing here when I was 13, and
I love that.
The same people still out here. It's still a really fun wave, and it doesn't turn on all that often, and it was really good for about a week when I was in Santa Cruz this fall. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I wonder if is your dad still get out there?
No, he's long. He was an ex-football player as well, and so he's kind of a little bit more broken when it comes from a career in football. So he doesn't surf pretty much at all anymore, which is a bummer. But that's aging.
Was he a pro football player?
No, he played through college. He tried out for the pros, but he was kind of more obsessed with surfing, and he's been a football coach his entire life. He's an English teacher and a football coach. So.
God, man, I think about Santa Cruz a lot, thinking about how in like the 70s, like you could have had such a great life with like just kind of regular jobs like that, and how that's just so, I mean, it's like that anywhere in California now, and that's just like so hard to do. I mean, just being like a coach and a teacher, just like having a dream life in Santa Cruz. I mean, good luck. God, that was
we could go deep into housing crisis and neoliberalism and macroeconomics and stuff, but it's totally changed, and it's weird. Like my parents still live in Pleasure Point, and my mom was a journalist, my dad was a high school teacher and a football coach, and was able to live in a place in Santa Cruz. And there's like no chance you could buy a house at with those jobs in Santa Cruz anymore. And it's such a bummer. And we're, there's some changes that have been happening around the point, and much more empty houses that are only filled up on the weekends. And it's just kind of, it's just, it's a different vibe. Like I loved Santa Cruz in the way that I took it for granted, but it was rough around the edges. And I look back at it, and I like the rough around the edges. There's things have gotten more gentrified, and sure, there's better coffee for sure. But the rough around the edges parts of it, like, kind of gives it some culture. And sure, there's obviously some downside to it. But it just had like a bit of a working class vibe to it, and that's totally changed, especially in the last 10 years.
I remember getting chewed out surfing the hook, when I was probably like 19 or 20. And like now, I don't even surf there anymore because there's 200 dudes on soft tops, and it's just it's a whole different thing. But I mean, I could talk surf all day, but
me too.
Well, so actually I should ask, because now I'm kind of curious. You seem like a big dude. Like, how big are you?
6'2", 205 pounds.
Yeah, that makes sense too, in terms of like, I'm about 6'2", and it's tough for us big guys in the surf world. I mean, there's not a lot of like world-class surfers that are over like 5'8". So
they're all like big wave surfers if they're really big. And that was even growing up. Like there's a lot of the small kids. Same can be said for freeskiing too. I'm I guess that makes sense. Big guy in a small guy's game. Even when it comes to what I do now with ski mountaineering, I am not the typical body type for people that climb up mountains.
Yeah, interesting. I've actually never really thought about that. I'm not sure how many mountaineers I've been around personally, but I'm sure that like I mean being small helps in virtually any physical thing unless you're just trying to push somebody else around. So that makes total sense.
I've noticed my strength as being this big. I can carry a heavy pack better than just about anyone.
I mean that's cool, I guess. That's cool. But also hard. So how did you? Okay, so you grow up. Your parents are going up to that cabin. I kind of thought maybe by the way you were going to say you're from like Aptos or something like because you could have like that same sort of cabiny vibe like in Aptos. Aptos. Yeah. I never really know how to say it.
It's Aptos.
Is it? Okay, sorry.
I went to Aptos High. My dad was a football coach and a teacher there. So even though I grew up on the east side, I should have gone to SoCal High. I went to Aptos High because my dad was there and I played football there.
Yeah, but like, obviously you can sort of live, I mean, the sort of cabiny vibes there too, so it sort of made sense. But so you're going up on the weekends, you get pretty good at it. I mean, were you competing at a young age? Because I mean, I know you had like an alpine racing career too.
Yeah, so I started off with ski racing. There's kind of two paths for skiing back then, in the early 90s, late 80s even, that you were a ski racer or you could do kind of mogul skiing or freestyle skiing. And I started with the Mighty Might program at Palisades Tahoe. And then went into racing and I kind of started doing pretty good at racing. It was just it was the biggest team. The race team was kind of like the thing you did. And I definitely had dreams of the Olympics, watching Tommy Moe win a gold medal at the Lillehammer Olympics. When you're young, you're like, yeah, that's what I want to do. And watching even that Warren Miller movie, there was an amazing downhill racing segment. Even though I was so inspired by Scott Schmidt, there was one of Bill Johnson at the Calgary Olympics. And so downhill racing seemed like the path, and it seemed like a career path too. So I went down the racer kind of rabbit hole, and I really did like it, but I can't say I was super in love with it. I was just doing well at it until I got into at an older age and I got into downhill racing. Mm-hmm. I fell in love with downhill racing. Downhill racing is incredible. It is still to this day, I think, one of the coolest things I've ever done on skis is a handful of downhill races because I mean, no other sport in the world are you donning a Lycra skin suit with no pads, and then you have a helmet on, 210, 215 centimeter skis, and are jumping 150 feet and going like fastest speed I ever got clocked at was 93 miles an hour in a downhill course. And you're like, I can count on like one hand how many times I've done 93 miles an hour in my car. Yeah. And you're like, it's pretty cool. Like to be able to do that and be racing these incredible courses. So that was kind of the original path, was kind of on this US ski team, Olympic style path.
Were you on the US ski team?
No, I never made it on the US ski team. I was kind of on that path. I was, doing like the Western Regional team. Mm-hmm. I started going to US ski team development camps and whatnot. But I could go on forever of why it didn't work out. But I could say my heart wasn't totally in it. Uh-huh. It was also hard financially for my parents, being that lower or like middle class, not lower middle class, but just pure middle class. Ski racing is an incredibly expensive sport. And most of the kids that were on that path would go to New Zealand or Chile for the entire summer and then just train. And then even I was a weekend warrior, so I didn't even train through the week, like midweek. I would just pretty much show up and go to a ski race. And it wasn't until I was about 17 years old that I transferred high schools to up here in Tahoe, lived on a cot in my best friend's room, and was able to actually kind of ski during midweek. So for a long time, like, I just didn't have kind of the means to train through the entire summer because financially that was unviable. I mean, you're talking $30,000 just out of pocket back then to go train for the summer. And, a lot of the kids that are ski racers, they come from pretty wealthy families. There's a study back in the day that they had a direct correlation to family wealth and the success in ski racing. So we didn't quite have that. And then again, there's so many things you look back at that career, but my heart wasn't that in it. I skipped training a lot to go ski POW. I skipped, training to go to the park and chase around all these like legendary free riders that were in my backyard at the time. Free skiing was being born as a sport and just becoming the coolest thing in the world while I was in the heart of my younger ski racing days, my teenage years. And man, my head went that way for sure.
Yeah, so your eyes are kind of open to a different possibility. How do you navigate that, right? Like, I mean, how do you go from, okay, I'm on the ski racing path, I see this other world where people are just getting paid just to ski, and just go where they want. Well, where the sponsors want, but for the most part, go to these amazing places. Like, do you reach out? Are you like beating down people's doors? Do they come to you? How does that happen in terms of getting onto that program of being like a professional free skier?
Well, it started just like kind of naturally, and through obsession. So like, I remember watching one of my first ski movies, and I was 15 years old, and it was like, for some reason I'd missed out on this the TGR and MSP revolution. And it was on the Resort Sports Network on a TV in Mammoth, and I was on a ski race, and all of a sudden the MSP movie Sixth Sense popped on. And it was just like Shane McConkey, Seth Morrison, Ken Kreidler, and I was just like, my mind was blown at what was going on. And I all of a sudden realized it's like, wait, like these guys are in my backyard. And when I started skiing the next year, just free skiing, like I would literally see those guys in line and do everything I could to get the chair behind them and then chase them around. And I chased them around like numerous days, like JT, Scott Gaffney. I would just be on a chairlift behind him. I'd be on race skis and they're on fat twin tips, and I'd be like straight lining everything to try and keep up with them, jump the cliff right after they jumped it. And eventually, like, I remember like JT was kind of like, hey, who are you? Why are you following us around? Why don't you just come ski with us? And I was like, all right, cool. That's awesome. And
how old would you have been about this period?
Probably about 15, 15 or 16. And, and then, I just started to get to know JT, started to get to know Scott Gaffney, started to get to know Shane, but very lightly. I can't say I was friends with him. And I would just like go ski every day. And then there was a year when I was like 16, my surfer mindset, growing up surfing, we'd go, dawn patrol all the time. And I remember thinking at one point, like, well, skiing's my favorite thing in the world. On powder days, why don't I just get up before the sun comes up and go stand in line to get first chair? So there was a year, my best friend and I, George Gelty, literally were first chair on KT every single POW day for a season, because we were like, people were showing up in line for a 9 o'clock opening, maybe 7:45, 8. We just started showing up at 6:30. Like we were just there every day, in the dark, waiting for the chairs to pop. And I think we just started to people started noticing us because we just, go ski nose to fingers, first lap, go send the fingers. And, people kind of were like, started taking notice, like, who are these kids? Who are these 16-year-old kids that just are always here at first chair and sending as hard as possible? And so we just kind of started building like local kind of cred and whatnot. And I can't say I balanced it well. Jumping off cliffs and skiing powder is one of the funnest things you can do. And when I was ski racing, like I would show up to ski races, and Santa Cruz, the snowboard brand, brand, they used to make like snowboard outerwear. And one of the guys in Santa Cruz gave me a full kit, and it was so baggy that I could like wear my speed suit underneath and just take off my pants over my like ski boots when all the racer kids had tight pants and they'd have to zip them off. And I would show up to ski races on fat skis and with like the baggiest outfit, to the point where I would get kicked off the ski course.
Not taking it seriously.
Yeah, they would be like, hey, this guy's like not a racer. When I would go in for inspection, you're going to slip the course and do inspection. And I'd show up on like free skis and in baggy clothes, and they'd be like, dude, you're not a racer. Get out of here. Where's your bib? And I'm like, my bib's in my backpack that's down at the lodge where everyone else's bib is at. And they'd be like, you need to leave the course. I'm like, no, I'm a racer. I'm racing today. And it happened twice. I got kicked off the course. And I think the coaches just, I didn't fit in with their mold of showing up with GS skis, and I would go inspect and then go ski for the rest of the day because I'd be in some incredible place. I'm like, I want to go explore this mountain, when all the other racers would do 2 or 4 runs a day. They would do an inspection, the race run, and another inspection and a race run, and I would ski bell to bell. So it was just kind of like I think the coaches, they didn't like my attitude and the fact that I was just so obsessed with free skiing. But they also couldn't ignore me because I kept doing just good enough where I'd still have to be invited to camps and to certain races. So it was a weird thing, especially back then. Free skiing was looked really down upon, and my coaches really didn't like that I was a free skier.
How much, I don't ski. So how much of the skills from ski racing apply directly, other than just being comfortable on skis? But I mean, are there things that do you look back and go, I'm glad I was a ski racer when I'm doing what I'm doing now because of X, Y, and Z?
I am 100% glad I was a ski racer, because when we talk about style and free ride, people often talk about air style and jumping style and whatnot, but 98% of the time you're on your skis making turns, and ski racing teaches you the most fundamentals to make a good turn in any situation. So when I'm watching modern free skiers come up, the level is so high, but I see a lot of kids that will fall in really unexpected places. They'll do a backflip off a 50-foot cliff and then be straight lining out the bottom or trying to make turns to slow down and just completely tomahawk. And I think back so many times in my competitive freeride career where the conditions are not good quite often. It's hard to time up perfect conditions, and you'd be land in air, and I'd literally think downhill turn, and I'd just get into that fundamental turn position, powerful position to, dump speed, make a critical turn over exposure while going 60 miles an hour through horrible snow. So it's interesting because I've seen a majority of professional free skiers have a trained background. They were on high rated ski racers or mogul skiers, because even a mogul's turn is a lot different, but it's the same fundamentals. And to me, it's been hard to displace a lot of the old guys because of the old crew can kind of make things look better than they are. When we're filming ski movie segments, it's not always perfect conditions, but you can kind of get through it if you have really good technique and fundamentals. And to me, I look back at ski racing and I'm so thankful for it. Some of the most impactful lines I've ever skied, I'm we're a direct route from ski racing to that point. So to me, it's with my son, if he wants to be a skier, it's unfortunate, but he's going to have to do some sort of trained program, because it ingrains you a technique that will be good for the rest of your life.
You hear that, kids? I mean, I don't know if there are kids listening to this, but or parents of young skiers. I mean, I could say that certainly the same thing with learning the fundamentals of anything is super important. But I mean, I think this a lot when I'm watching surf contests and the guys that just grew up just trying to do airs. And the guys that can, and girls, and the guys and girls that could do bottom turns and get barreled are the ones that usually end up doing better in contests, but also just better overall surfers. So I mean,
totally,
that makes sense to me. Okay, so you've now what you move once you move on to the free skiing path. How long have you how long has that been your career to this point? I mean, you're born in 83, so you're what, 40, pushing 40?
Yeah, 40. And so, I mean, I was first started getting sponsored as a ski racer when I was 15, 16 years old, and kind of got some flow deals. I quit ski racing when I was 20 years old. That was when I finally kind of just pulled the pin on it. And luckily I had a sponsor, Solomon, which was my ski racing sponsor. I literally just asked them hey, can I be a free rider? And they were like, yep, sure. And that very next year, they gave me my first paid contract. So I was 21 years old when I first started making money as a professional free skier. So yeah, it'll be pretty much 20 years this very next year, or if not sooner.
That seems that seems like a long run. I mean, yeah.
I'm an old guy in this department, and the fact that I've sometimes I sit there and people will ask what's the greatest accomplishment you had in skiing? And I'm like, the fact that I'm like been doing this for 20 years, like this is my career. Like, you know, you wanted to be a skier and somehow you've made a job out of this for this long is kind of the greatest accomplishment I can think of.
Well, one of the things I was curious about is what, like how you define sort of success as a free skier. I mean, is it obviously financial? If you can do it financially, I suppose that's probably what mostly counts, right? Like you're making it, it's happening. But is it, how much of it is that, and how much of success is defined by you being able to ski like what you want to ski or grow as a skier, if that makes sense? Yeah,
I mean, I think the thing I would define the most is are you happy? Are you content with life? Are you, are you just like genuinely like feel very happy about the life you've created for yourself? Because there is a potential downside about turning your passion into a job.
Absolutely.
There's that old maxim of like, hey, like do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And it's not really true, because like you still are going to work, and there's a downside to every single job. And I will say you can kind of cheapen the love that you may have for it, of your passion, if you turn it into a job. And there's been times in my career I started to get burned out. I started to see like, I feel like I'm mailing it in. I feel like I'm just out here creating segments and creating things in order to keep this job going. And I've been lucky enough to kind of pivot multiple times within my career when that started happening. And that is the good side of this, is you can create your own path. But, to turn what you love into a job has potential downsides. I think I've managed to avoid that, because I always go back to when I was a kid thinking about being a skier. And I think the greatest failure I would ever have in life is if I turn my back on skiing because I don't like it anymore because the job burned me out on it. If I sit here at some point and being like, no, I don't want to ski ever again because I'm like burned out because of this job, then I failed. And so to me, it's like I make sure that I hold on to enough purity within this sport that I don't ever treat it like it's just purely a job, because ultimately, like, why would I choose to be a pro skier? I could do a lot of other jobs, probably make a lot more money and be a lot less stressful with a lot less risk if I, was doing it just as a job to support my family. Like there has to be some happiness. There has to be some contentment, this like joy in life that comes out of it. Otherwise, I'll just go get another job.
Well, we're going to take a little break here, but when we come back, we're going to talk a bit about, what kind of has come free. Well, I guess it's still considered free skiing, but like, the 50 project and how, and which was clearly like the next iteration of your evolution as a professional skier. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have more with Cody Townsend.
You love adventure, we love adventure, and that is why we created Adventure Journal in print. It is the gift that we've made for ourselves and for our friends, and hopefully for you, that is analog, that gets away from screens, that gives you some of the most interesting, deepest, and thoughtful stories from some of the best writers and photographers working in the outdoor space. We do 4 a year. You get free shipping and a deep discount. It's $60 to have this absolutely beautiful, no batteries necessary celebration of adventure in your mailbox. Get it at adventure-journal.com. I am drinking, it's gotten cold now because we're halfway through the show. I am drinking Long Weekend Coffee. We launched Long Weekend Coffee earlier this year to bring you and us blends that are not fussy, that will take any kind of brew method that we like, whether it's at home, in a cabin, on the tailgate of a truck, doesn't matter. We have 4 blends. We have dark, medium, espresso roast, and a decaf. I think they're pretty amazing. I guarantee you will like them. Check us out at longweekend.coffee.
Welcome back, everybody. The Adventure Journal podcast. Justin Hausman here with free skiing legend Cody Townsend. We've been chatting a little bit about how Cody went from growing up in Santa Cruz and kind of progressing through life as a sort of skiing prodigy and a ski racer, and then finding his footing more in the free skiing world. And naturally that leads us to what I sort of assume you're going to be best known for when all is said and done, which is your Project to 50. And you know, as a non-skier, I don't watch a lot of ski footage. I will occasionally, but the 50 is amazing. I mean, hopefully everybody out there knows it. I'll let Cody kind of fill you in on what it is, but you know, essentially it's Cody climbing and skiing all of the 50 classic ski descents from a book that lists them essentially, and it's incredibly compelling even if you don't ski. I mean, I guess I would say, and Cody, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, the skiing isn't really the most important part of these typically. I mean, it's cool, but I mean, most of it is you climbing it and the logistics of getting there, talking about the peak that you're at and all that sort of stuff. So it doesn't, you know, even if you don't ski, it's still pretty cool. If you have any interest at all in mountaineering or just doing tough things outside, you'll really enjoy it. I mean, I've watched most of them. So anyway, so Cody, why don't you talk us through how you even like came across the book that you kind of based this on, and how you decided that this was going to be a big pursuit. I mean, this has taken up a lot of your life, like how this is going to be a big pursuit for you.
Yeah. So, first, thank you for the kind words. Second, yeah, it's like, it was actually funny when I first started pitching it to supporters and sponsors. I would tell them, I'm like, it's going to be like 80% not skiing. Like, yeah, it's everything that goes into it. And the reason was because when I started to do kind of expedition skiing, adventure skiing, more human powered adventures, like I found the days leading up to it and the decisions that you make along the way to be far more fascinating than the ski down. It was this like massive puzzle piece. And I could see like I had just enough experience where the consequence of waking up 30 minutes too late because you thought it was going to take X number of hours could mean the difference between success and failure. And so I started seeing like this, like all the stuff that goes behind the scenes was really interesting to me. So when I was pitching it, I was like, it's everything but the skiing. The skiing is the reward at the end, but I want to take people along for the ride. And I like pitched it very much when I was working on how we were going to shoot this. I was like, I want people to be on my shoulder going along for this. And so that was kind of stylistically how we ended up shooting it and how the episodes end up getting kind of put together. But you know, the book itself, The 50 Classic Ski Descents of North America, which was by Chris Davenport, Penn Newhart, and Art Burrows. And Chris Davenport's kind of the main face of it. Mm-hmm. He's a professional skier. It came out in, I think, about 2010. Funny enough, I was actually in the book. There's pictures of me in the book on one of the lines. And in 2010, I was still so obsessed with ski racing that they sent me a copy of it. And I like looked through it. And I just found it really ironic that I was in there because it's all these like ski mountaineering lines, like skiing the Ford Stetner on the Grand Teton, you know, all these like major kind of lines that are involved like alpinism style tactics. And I was just like, yeah, that's not for me. Like I'm still free ride guy. I want to ski powder and flip off cliffs. So I like took it and I closed it. And then in 2014 is kind of when everything changed. Contextually, there was a lot of tragedy around the ski community, specifically in Tahoe. A lot of my friends, mentors, and heroes were passing within the sport. And that concurred with me also having like the most successful freeride season I've ever had. The crack, which went up on YouTube as the most insane line ever, went super viral. And then I won a bunch of awards that year, like all kind of the top awards in our sport. And this question I kept getting from the outside, and even I was asking myself, is what's next? And in a sport and a career that is defined by how you progress, how you top what you did the year before, I looked at myself and I'm like, there's no way to top what I've done safely. And I also knew there was no way to top what I've done because I just knew like I'd kind of reached where I wanted to reach. Like all these dreams I had of what I could do, that stage in my career, I knew I wasn't going to necessarily progress much more. I was watching a younger generation with a lot of park influence come in and doing incredible tricks. I'm like, I can't do that.
I can't do that.
And like what I had as a desire in like big mountain, fast charging, big huck kind of free riding, I'm like, I've kind of done that. Like I don't find myself dreaming about how to push it more. And so Very next year, I actually stopped filming with MSP, which I'd been filming with for the 4 or 5 years prior. And I was just like, I'm done with that. And I went on my very first expedition to Svalbard, did my first winter camping trip ever. It turned out to in a film called Eclipse.
Is that Norway?
No, yeah, it's an island off of Norway.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was a Solomon film called Eclipse. It was my first time like spending multiple weeks sleeping in a tent in the snow. And then I did a kind of another trip that was like snowmobile access, ski mountaineering up in northern BC. And like, I just found this new draw to more human-powered adventures, expeditions, not using helicopters. I realized there was this whole realm that I didn't know about. And the next few years, I kind of started like searching, hey, what's next for me? And, I was kind of starting to dabble back into some free ski movies, but my heart wasn't in it. It was just kind of like, keep the career going. Like I had such a big name at that point. It was like, well, people would want to film with me. I'll go film. But I picked the book back open, I think like 2015 or maybe 16. And I was like, like all of a sudden these lines kind of speaking to me. And I was like, man, I would really love to ski from the summit of the Grand. And I would really love to ski this line and that line. And all of a sudden I would love to ski Denali. And I was like, man, I should maybe just try and ski all of these.
Yeah.
And
not some of them.
Yeah, not some of them, like all of them. And because there was the list, like all of a sudden the bucket list in the book was like 20 lines long, and I was like, well, I should just try and ski all of them. And then I like really started questioning myself because I started figuring out that no one's ever done that before. I'm like, okay, like you're a free ride dude with no like ski mountaineering experience. You're like 6'2", 205 pounds. You're not a ski touring dude. Like, why has no one done this? So I spent the next like 2 to 3 years of really kind of like analyzing the lines, really figuring out more, trying to go out and learn more. I ended up going to Denali in 2017, just as with some friends as like a test trip, because it was my first like kind of expedition where you're moving, camps on a daily basis at a mountain of that altitude and size and prominence. I was like, I'm going to use this as a test. And I ended up skiing the Mesner Couloir, which was one of the classics. And I was like, that was incredible. That was such an amazing trip. We had it absolutely perfect. Still to this day, I skied the Mesner Couloir solo from probably I dropped in at like 9 at night and got done with it at 11 at night. And, the sun is low in the horizon. And it was just one of the most beautiful skis I've ever had in my life. And I was like, yeah, you're doing this. And it wasn't until the next years, I kind of spent this time thinking like, how can I do this? How can I mesh it into a career? How do I like tell my sponsors about this? And like, are you really going to be capable of doing this? And I still questioned it, but it wasn't until I kind of realized at one point, I'm like, you're going to regret it the rest of your life because you've been thinking about this for years if you don't try.
Yeah.
And that's all you should do is try. And so in 2019, I announced to the world my intentions, which was one of the hardest things I had to get over because it was like, I almost wanted to disappear for 5 years and go try and then come back out and be like, hey, like I tried, here's, I did 45 of them. But I knew that wasn't going to be feasible from keeping a career going. And so I decided to come out with this episodic series. And then the very first episode launched in 2019 in January. And I told the whole world, I'm like, hey, this is what I'm doing now. And and that's pretty much the story ever since. And man, it's been, it was much more, it's taken off much bigger than I ever thought it was possible.
I can't remember, it's probably a PR firm working with one of your sponsors, but I remember that first one, and I remember we covered it at AJ, and I remember, oddly enough, getting this kind of icy feeling in my stomach that was like, oh shit, like putting myself in your position, being like, that's such a giant commitment to just bite off publicly like that, like
totally,
like, oh my God, like that's got to be worse than, almost any of the prep that you have to do, or any like fears while you're on the mountain, just being like, I just told the whole world I have to do this. I have to do this now. Like
it definitely was. It was by far the hardest thing to get over. And in order to get to that place, what I really had to mentally prepare for is like, are you going to be comfortable with the rest of your life people questioning you if you didn't finish, because those that are in the know, your peers, yourself, you'll be like, know that there's a very good reason you didn't finish. But there's a lot of people out there that exterior are going to be like, why didn't you finish? Why didn't you finish? Even so much so that in one of the very first episodes, I talked to Mark and Janelle Smiley, who tried to do all 50 of the 50 classic climbs of North America.
Okay.
And they got to about 48 and stopped. And they were like, yeah, we've been asked about it nonstop. And it kind of drives you crazy. And you're like, we were going to die. That's why.
Yeah.
And so like, I had to be comfortable with that before I actually publicly announced it. And when I got to that point, it was like, yeah, whatever, like just try. That's all that matters, is if you try. I really want to try these lines. I really want to experience it. I want to see what it's like to be focused on one line for years at a time and try over and over and over, and eventually maybe make a call that like, hey, it's not worth it, or like, yeah, let's keep trying. And since then, yeah, that's been kind of the thing. And to this day, like, I skied 46 of them. I have 4 left, but I don't know if I'm going to finish. And I know deep within myself, like I will be very comfortable if I don't finish.
I hadn't thought about it this way, but hearing you talk about it, I'm sure you've thought about this too. But I mean, it almost sounds like that's how you approach one summit, right? Like you hope that you can make it, but there's a turnaround point. Maybe you don't, and you have to be okay with that. It's interesting that an entire series of attempts could be a similar thing, but that's kind of how it feels hearing you say it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of trappings, especially in the mountains, because the mountains to me, and when you're doing kind of human-powered adventures, they're a mirror to yourself. They show you your weaknesses, they show you your strengths, and if you aren't very self-aware of what your motivations are going into a line, that's to me like a recipe for disaster. Because if you're very ego-driven, if this objective, like we drove so far, we've been trying this line so much, it's questionable, I just got to get this done because of the number, that's what leads to really bad decision making. And so I knew from the beginning that I have to be very self-aware that this number of 50 is not the ultimate goal, because your ultimate goal is to come home at the end of the day, and the next goal is to have fun, and then the third goal is to ski the 50. And if I put the number or the check mark ahead of number 1 and number 2, then you're doing this wrong. And so since then, like, even I'd almost say it's as I've gotten more knowledgeable and more skilled in this, I have to be even more self-aware of it. As I get closer to the end, I have to be very, very conscious that like you make decisions for what you're observing around you, what the mountain is telling you, what you feel in your gut, not because you're going to come home with footage and get to tell everyone you checked it off the list. So it's an interesting process, and one that I've been like very self-aware and acutely aware of and thinking about since the beginning of the project.
Well, I mean, 46, I mean, that's a lot, man. And you've been doing it for 4 or 5 years now, I guess. 4 years, 5 years. I mean, surely that's, I mean, have you been successful at that? Have you been successful at not doing it just because you're checking off a number? I mean, like, how many, I got to think at least a few of these, you're like, fuck, I really don't want to be here. But like, here it is. This is my chance. I got to do it. I mean, like, I don't know. Maybe not,
I mean, so like I've been kind of gotten known as a pretty conservative decision maker, and we turn around quite a lot, and
that comes across in the show too.
Yeah, and I'd rather be truthful with that. And I think, I look back at it and I'm like, was there any like yellow flag days? Like a red flag day is like you turn around or you don't even try. And how many yellow flag days? And I actually can only look at like 1 or 2 out of the 46. And the thing is, like, because we're traveling so far for these lines, I'm trying to make calls on whether to drive to Montana tomorrow for a line from 1,000 miles away. So I'm usually going to be erring on the side of the avalanche report is full, low, like all levels being, the alpine, the mid slopes, and then the down low is low avi danger, and the weather is super stable, and it's going to be hard pack and terrible skiing, but I just know the danger factor is going to be so low that it's worth driving there. So we also ski a lot of shitty snow in the process, but that's a byproduct of just trying to tick off so many so quickly. I mean, year 1, we ticked off 20 in the first year. And then what's crazy is like, it feels like 46, but like we were starting to tick them off really quickly the next year. And then we had a pandemic happen.
Yeah.
And in the middle of our like March 14th, right as we're getting into our primetime season, the whole world shut down. And then the very next year, we couldn't even get across the border, and a lot of the lines were up in Canada. So we made good progress, but the pandemic slowed us down. But and I'm fine with that. Like if there's anything I look back at, I'm like, man, I wish I could savor this a little bit longer, because that first year flew by, like 20 in a year. And I was like, whoa, I don't even remember some of them. I almost wish that, I'd have a little more time with each of these places.
They're not going anywhere.
No, they're not.
They're not going anywhere. So how do you, is it the same film crew every time? Like, how does that work? I mean, is there going to be somebody, like you said, you might not do them all, but maybe you will. I mean, is there somebody right behind you who's also doing them all because it's your filmer, or is it different crew?
So I hired the cinematographer and very accomplished ski mountaineer, Bjarne Salen. He's from Sweden. He lived in Chamonix for a long time, and then he now lives here in the States. He has been along the ride and filming every single one of them. We've rarely, if almost never, had two filmers. It's just been him and I driving around in our vans and trucks and sleeping in our trucks and documenting them. So the only one he hasn't done that I've done is the Mesner Couloir in Denali. And if for some reason, so I've done 46, he's done 45. And for some reason, I do finish and I get to 50. He's at 49. I've made it like a promise to him that I will go to Denali with him and we'll go ski the Mesner Couloir, and we won't document it. It's not a work trip. We'll just go ski it awesome. And have a fun trip, because he's been along the ride for every single one of them.
But you have other people with you a lot too, right? So are these friends of yours already? Do you choose like almost guides for some of these places, or how does the crew assemble for something like this?
So like it's funny enough, I looked at it from a very media side at the very first part. I was like, there is no way that I can carry a show by myself for 50 episodes. And I was like, I need to have guest characters. And I looked at it, I was like, what'd be really cool is to have like local legends, people that are underground, people that I know from that area, friends that are professional skiers, along with, if you get a chance, like some big name people. And so the very first year, like I was just like, I'd go up to BC and I'd be like, I have friends, John Johnson and Chris Rubens, give them a call, and we'd start talking about it. And it wasn't until I skied the Grand with Jimmy Chin that I realized it was like, oh, this is actually really helpful from a ski standpoint of like, these people really know that area or know that line and live in that snowpack. And then so that I realized, I was like, oh, it's also really uniquely, I'm a unique position that I know so many people from years as being a professional skier that I can just call random people up from that area and be like, hey, let's go ski. I will say when you go into the more serious lines, the more lines of consequence, then I like to try to bring along trusted partners, people that I really know and understand, so that we can make decisions like a team and we understand where we're coming from. And then from the guide standpoint, it just happens like so many of my friends are actually guides.
Yeah.
We were never really like guided in the traditional sense, like hiring a guide to bring us along, but it's just my friends are guides, and so they come along, and then it's beneficial because they're very knowledgeable and good at what they do. So that's kind of like, it's mainly just people I know within the industry, or local heroes to that area, and just kind of like know the zone really well. And then too, it adds character to the series. Is like you just get so many cool guest stars that are coming along for the ride, and people get to know them as well.
Well, one of the things, if you haven't seen the show, one of the things that I appreciate about it is that like your vulnerability and willingness to be conservative and willingness to lean on others is really apparent. Like, it's not like this like man against the mountain, I'm going to like climb the shit out of this thing, and like shred it down and like grunting. Or, I mean, it feels very much like it's interesting. You feel like you could do it too. Like, I don't even ski, and I'm watching it with you, and I'm like, okay, like he seems stressed. Like, you seem genuinely scared at a lot of moments. And I'm like, okay, I probably would be too. Okay, I feel like I could do this, and I don't know if that's at all part of like your motivation going into it, but there is sort of a sense of I don't know, like it's aspirational to a certain degree. And like, I don't have like a bucket list of 50 things I want to do at all, but I mean, in a sense, you do kind of feel swept along with it. Like, you know what, shit, I could probably do this. Like, this guy's doing it. Not that you don't seem capable. It just seems the way you approach it is really refreshing, that it's not such like a dominant sort of a thing.
Yeah, well, it's not the experience that I have in the mountains, and I wanted to share the authentic experience. And I would say, like, you know, growing up watching and idolizing people like Shane McConkey and then getting to know him and then somehow getting in that position. And, you know, I get this feeling people think we're superheroes. And I'm like, dude, no, we're not superheroes. We're normal. I'm scared out of my mind. And I like can work through and process that fear and draw on past experiences and know what's going on with the mountains to figure out how to do this in a safe and awesome way. And so when it came into this project, I would say, like, I didn't have anything to prove. Like, I just came off of like the most successful part of my career, and I felt like very comfortable with who I was, my successes and all that. I shedded that insecurity that you can have in your 20s and that ego that you can have when you're young to try to prove yourself. And I came into this project going like, dude, I'm like not the most likely person to try to finish this thing. Like, there's way more accomplished ski mountaineers that are far fitter, far more talented, far more skilled. And so I just was like, I want to share my experience, and I want to share that, you know, we have these conversations of questioning whether we go on or questioning if we have to turn around. I want to share the fact that I'm scared, because that's the real experience. And like, when you see that like kind of superhero style stuff, like, it just means they're not showing the scared part, because everyone gets scared out there. And if I use fear, I like fear. Not that it's like I like being scared, like I hate being scared, but I also know that fear is a really powerful like focus point. When I was in my freeride career, there's a few instances when I stopped being scared on legitimately very dangerous things and started to hurt myself. And I was sitting there going like, dude, you're going to actually kill yourself because you're not giving enough focus to the mountain. You're not giving enough focus to the line because you're not scared. It feels like you're just kind of mailing it in. And so for me, like, I want to be in those moments fearful. And I try to go into the mountains, no matter what the day is, fearful, because it will help me focus on going through that day, making the right decisions. And I also say sometimes it's a unique energy amplifier. There's no way, like, there's times like I will try, and if I've got a 5,000 foot climb and the last 500 feet are steep, well, I'm going to go full bore for 4,500 feet because I know that adrenaline shot's going to get me through that last 500 feet. So it's like, to me, like, I wanted to share that. There was no like conscious decision, oh, I need to be vulnerable. It was just like, this is my experience in the mountains, so I want to share that with people.
Did you is there an organizational strategy behind which ones, you know, the order which you've tackled these? Is it just kind of what's doable at that time, or did you kind of front load it or back load it with difficulty or anything like that? So
I tried to, in many ways, kind of be like, all right, try to tick off difficult lines while you can. So if a more difficult line presents itself, go do that. So you're not, because those have less opportunity for the right snow, the right snowpack, and the right weather all coming together in order to do that. So on the micro level, there was times when I was like, you know, the very first year, I remember there's a few zones coming in, but I was like, let's go to Colorado. Everything's going stable and perfect, and go ski Pyramid Peak and the Landry line, which is, you know, one of the more gnarly, steep, dangerous lines in Colorado. And it was funny. It was my first time ever backcountry skiing in Colorado, was skiing the Landry line. So on that micro level, I was always trying to tick off more difficult ones. But then the fact is, like, the most difficult ones, the cruxes, the ones that I have left, they take so much time, focus, and energy and big expeditions that I realized it was like, okay, when we get into the cycle, when those lines are in, let's say April and May, they are all kind of at the same time. And in a certain way, I was like, you know what, I'll just start ticking off some of the other ones and let's go do 3 or 4. And as we get to the end, like, I'll get more time to specifically prepare, both mentally, skills wise, and even just physically wise for these last ones. So ultimately, like, that first year, it was pretty easy because you had 50 lines to choose from. As it's gotten on, I have less and less lines to choose from. So I'm just waiting for specific conditions in specific areas, and then just going on expeditions at the end of the season and hoping it comes into condition. And if it doesn't, then you try again. And if it doesn't again, you keep trying.
So I read somewhere in the last couple of days that, you're not really necessarily planning, or at least you're not sure. I guess if you only have 4 left, that's probably why. But if there's going to be a series in 2024.
It's actually the last episode comes out in a week. It's taken a long time to get this out, but I am announcing that this is the last YouTube episode of the 50. There's going to be new things coming on for like a YouTube series because there's still stuff I want to do. But when it comes to the 50 on YouTube, it's done. I'm not done attempting them. We are going to be documenting them, but nothing is going to come out until there is some sort of conclusion to this project. So that could be next year, and I tick off a few of them and say,
just kind of package it all together.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Or it could be in 5 years, I say it's not worth it. Or it could be in 10 years, and I'm like, we did it. We did them all. And I don't know what that's like, but we're going to end up doing some sort of packaging thing of the rest of the, what the conclusion is to the 50. Where that comes out, there's a lot of stuff in the works right now, but it's probably not going to come out on YouTube. So we'll see.
Well, this is good timing. It's random that we're doing this now because I didn't realize it was your next episode was coming out when it's coming out, so that's pretty good timing. But that makes sense to me. I mean, how much of having a kid changes that calculation too?
A lot. But like people ask about the safety factor, and it's like I try to say that it's like, no, nothing has really changed in that because the goal was the same from when I started it. Like I had a wife, I have a family. I don't want to come home in a body bag. Yeah. The goal was to come home at the end of the day. And so with a kid there, like to me, it just raises the stakes, but I'm trying to do the exact same thing. And that is come home at the end of the day. I will say the unforeseen thing is that one, the time that you have in the day to train and prepare for this is much, much shortened. I can't just jet off for a week to go do a training trip somewhere. It's like, one, because I don't want to, I want to be around my kid. And then two, it's just like, logistically bailing on your wife and being like, hey, be a solo parent for this next week when it is not that fair. And so it definitely changes in that calculus. I was having that conversation with a friend yesterday. I was like, I knew it was going to be hard with being a parent, but I didn't know it was going to be this hard. And so, I'm still lucky enough. I have a supportive enough wife and family that are going to help while I'm gone for almost 2 months at this end of the season, but I just don't have quite as much time to devote to it. The good thing was I ticked off most of them before I had a kid. So ultimately, like living on the road for 4 months like I did before is not going to happen anymore. And then that's fine. That was that era. I wouldn't trade it anything for having a kid.
Well, shit, I was just going to pitch a new show that we could do together about like surfing the 50 most fun waves in California, but that would require more road trips. So
well, you could probably do it with your family a little bit easier as opposed to, winter trips and going to the backcountry. But trust me, I've thought about that, but no one really wants to see me surf.
Nobody wants to watch that. So it's just not the same.
Yeah, totally. I'd be like, yeah, I'm scared. And they're like, yeah, because you suck. Like, what are you doing out here? Like, you should not be out here.
That could be fun too. We'll figure it out. Look, I'm looking for any excuse to go on, get away from my 4-year-old and 2-year-old for months at a time. So I got to find my own 50.
Yeah, totally, for sure.
Well, we'll wrap it up there. So when is there an actual like go live date that you can share with us for the last episode, or is it just coming up soon?
It's coming up soon, but probably next Wednesday. So I would say the 20th of March, most likely. It's just taken. There's a lot of things to this episode, and it's taken months to dig up this archival footage I have of this specific line. And I wanted to tell this like full circle story of this line that I'd skied 21 years ago with friends. Cool. And then we'll go back to. So that's going to come out. And then actually in the meantime, right now, I might end up jetting up to a certain place for one of the lines because I'm seeing a weather window. And then I also have got expeditions starting April 25th all the way to June 21st up in Alaska. So
you'll still be busy.
Oh yeah, still very busy. And I've actually shot some new episodes this year that are not like 50 stuff, but just kind of like content along this style. And next year I'm going to have some more stuff related to what the 50 is about, but just not the 50.
Sweet. Well, it'll be cool to see where you take all this. Obviously you have a new lease on making videos and making films and making content after probably your experiences on the 50. So
yeah,
I mean,
cool. That's the other thing I learned is like in now producing 50 plus episodes, I think I've learned how to make like episodes or film. So, it was like pretty cool in this process to learn how to be a producer and how to put all this stuff together. So no, it's been a fun ride, and thanks everyone out there that's watching it and loving it. It's been crazy how many views it has. And it's been really cool.
Well, like I said, you don't have to ski. It's still pretty captivating. My wife watches them with me, and it's great.
Cool.
It'll make you feel more confident about doing any of these sort of things in life that you'd like to tackle. Watching Cody do this stuff too.
Cool.
Well, thanks a lot, Cody. Everyone, check out the 50. The last episode might be around March 20th, so be sure to bookmark that. And with that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you for listening. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to check us out at adventure-journal.com for everything that we're doing on the blog. And, of course, to subscribe to our beautiful printed quarterly, which Cody has been in before. It's actually Cody's favorite magazine. He was too humble to say anything about it, but he's wearing an Adventure Journal shirt right now in the background. Anyway, thanks a lot, Cody, and we will talk to you later. Bye, everybody.